Unable to sleep, I decided to head downstairs for a glass of water. It was midnight, and I carefully navigated the darkened house, trying not to make a sound. To my surprise, the lights were already on in the living room. As I approached, I overheard my husband, son, and daughter-in-law whispering. "Did you see how desperate she was, trying to win us over?" One of them said, followed by a chuckle. "Pathetic," another added. The look on her face when she saw the leftovers in the trash was priceless. The food wasn't even that good, but when she asked if we liked it, I almost lost it. They continued, laughing at my expense and calling me useless. I wished it were just a bad dream, but I knew things had gone too far for that. I had reached my limit. Ever since my son and his wife moved into the new house we built a few months ago, I've been continuously ignored. The three of them would look at me with eerie smirks. Lately, I had moved past anger and sadness. I felt nothing anymore. It didn't take long to decide to leave the house. I quietly returned to my room and started searching for a temporary apartment. The next night after work, I packed the essentials into a suitcase. Once I left for the temporary apartment, I received calls from my husband, my son, and his wife that same night. "Mom, come back right now. I was planning to treat you to dinner tonight. Please come back." "Hey, where are you? Stop being stubborn and come home now." They all kept chanting, "Come back," in unison. As I thought back on everything that had happened, I gave my response. "My name is Camilla. While working full-time, I also manage the household. My husband Oliver works as well, and it's a daily routine for him to complain about his subordinates at the breakfast table. Young subordinates these days don't even want to answer the phone. It's ridiculous. It's different now. Now everything can be done through social media. They lack a sense of responsibility as professionals. When I was younger, and from there, his endless stories about the past would begin. I would always listen with a sense of resignation. To put it bluntly, my husband is not someone with modern views. He casually says things like, "Men should work outside, and women should focus on housework and childcare," or, "Women should serve men." He can't stand not having control at home and likes to act like the Lord and Master. When our children got married and moved out, and I decided to become a working wife, he didn't like the idea, but I managed to convince him to let me work. By the way, about the new house we were planning to build, I gave a half-hearted response to his words, which he started with excitement. Despite being in his 50s, he had decided we should buy a new house. He said it would be more comfortable to spend our retirement in a new house rather than in our old, outdated one. But isn't our current house good enough? We could just remodel it instead of rebuilding. "No, it has to be a new house," he insisted stubbornly. Refusing to change his mind, Oliver pushed through with his plan, and we ended up hiring a home builder. "When it's finished, let's invite our son and his wife for a party. They'll love it," he exclaimed, excitedly planning the menu for the party. I knew he'd leave all the arrangements and serving to me while he just decided on the menu. I sighed quietly to myself. Soon, the new house was completed, and my husband and I moved in immediately. The unique scent of new wood filled the space with a gentle aroma. "Aren't you glad we built it?" He puffed out his chest proudly. Even though it felt a bit too spacious for just the two of us in a 2-story house. I couldn't help but feel a bit happy at that moment. A month later, Oliver and I invited our son and his wife for a housewarming party to celebrate the new house. Our son, Mason, and his wife, Daisy, entered with wide-eyed amazement. Currently living in an apartment, they couldn't stop expressing their admiration. "It's so spacious. "What a beautiful house! It's wonderful!" they exclaimed. Encouraged by their words, my husband casually suggested, "If you want, you can live with us. We have extra rooms. Come on, they can't possibly want to live with us." "Stop joking," I said, laughing it off. The party ended on a cheerful note. Little did I expect that they would take his words seriously and move in. A few days after the party, my son and his wife arrived with large luggage. "What's with all the stuff?" I asked, bewildered. Mason tilted his head. "We're moving in." Daisy added, "Your husband said it was okay." They walked in as if it was their home. When I asked about their apartment, they said they had canceled the lease, effective at the end of the month. "This is too sudden," I said, trying to gently oppose the idea, hoping they would choose to be independent. But they wouldn't listen and instead won Oliver over. Oliver said, "What's the difference if one or two more people live here? It's not about the number of people. And besides, if they've canceled their lease, they have nowhere to go." "It's cruel," I replied, even though it was their responsibility. But my husband was adamant, and thus they moved in with us, almost uninvited. After a while, a moving truck arrived in front of the house, and some well-built movers began diligently unloading boxes. They finally left with a cheerful "thank you," leaving my son and his wife's belongings scattered all over the new house. However, instead of tidying up, the two of them relaxed in the living room, lazily playing with their smartphones. "These are your things. Please put them away," I said, as there was no room to walk. Mason replied, "We're tired, so you should do it, Mom." Most of the moving had been done by the movers, and they had done nothing. My husband saw this and said nothing, merely glancing at the pile of boxes. "Oliver, say something to them," I urged. Oliver said, "Don't be so rigid, Camilla. You should do it for them. We're family." He then returned to his smartphone. I thought, why me asterisk, but I took a deep breath to calm myself. There must be fragile and important items among their belongings. Even though we're family, I felt uncomfortable handling their stuff. "Daisy, could you at least help me?" I asked. All 6 eyes turned to me, and they began to speak, one after another, accusing me of bullying, being unwelcoming, and being a terrible mother-in-law. I felt utterly bewildered, treated as if I were the unreasonable one. The next morning, still feeling exhausted, I went down to the living room. My husband, my son, and his wife were already awake, sipping coffee. As I stared at them absently, Mason muttered, "Thanks for yesterday." His words felt insincere, and I responded curtly. Mason continued, "As a thank you, we'll treat you to dinner." I thought I had misheard him, but apparently I hadn't. Mason added, "Daisy and I will go grocery shopping today." Daisy nodded from a distance. "Is that so? Well, I'll leave it to you today," I said. Daisy then added, "We just moved and don't have much money." Mason chimed in, "Yeah, so we actually need to borrow your card." I blinked in surprise. Were they planning to use my card for shopping and then treat me to dinner with my own money? Something felt off about this, but they asked for the credit card with such confidence. Should I give it to them? I glanced at my husband, who was sipping his coffee, showing no interest. Despite my hesitation, I decided to lend them the card, hoping to build a good relationship with them. Mason and Daisy were as happy as children given pocket money. "Use it responsibly," I warned, though inwardly I felt a bit excited myself. I thought this dinner could be an opportunity to get closer to them. "You can use anything from the kitchen and the dishes too." "The spices are in this cabinet." I showed Daisy the locations, and she nodded with a low yes. Later that evening, I came home from work, hoping that they would have dinner ready. How wonderful that would have been. In reality, instead, I found the house dark and silent. I turned on the lights and looked around, but there was no sign of my son and his wife. On the living room table, there were store-bought side dishes from the nearby supermarket and a note placed in the center. It read simply, "We're going out to eat." As I stood there in shock, Oliver came home and looked around the living room table. Seeing the store-bought dishes, he looked displeased. Oliver snapped, "You're the housewife. Don't slack off." "It's not me." Daisy and Mason said they'd handle dinner tonight. I replied, feeling frustrated. Despite their promise to prepare dinner, I was left with a feeling of unease, even after the meal. The next morning, I was determined to confront my son and his wife about the previous night. "Good morning." I greeted them, but my words seemed to vanish into thin air. No one responded. Until yesterday, they had at least acknowledged me. Feeling something was wrong, I made breakfast for the four of us and set it on the table, yet no one touched the food. They just sipped their coffee in the living room. Determined, I tried again to engage them. "Good morning," I said louder, but Oliver, my son, and his wife remained silent. This pattern continued the next day and the day after that, with all three of them ignoring me no matter what I did. A month passed, and nothing changed. Despite making meals, I was met with silence and felt increasingly empty. I started to wonder if I was the problem, and tried to be patient, hoping they would eventually open up. I made Oliver's favorite dishes, talked to Mason about his childhood, and invited Daisy to go shopping. Yet, I was continually ignored, and time just kept passing. Another week went by, and not only was the food I made left untouched, but it was also thrown into the trash. "Mason, did you always dislike this?" I asked, my voice trembling. That day, I had made fried chicken, shredded cabbage, croquettes, and sunny-side-up eggs. Both the fried chicken and croquettes were homemade, his favorites since he was a child. Watching him silently throw the food into the trash beside the sink filled me with a strange fear. Shortly after that, my husband handed me a piece of paper. Actually, it would be more accurate to say he threw it at me just before I entered the living room. It was neatly folded into a paper airplane and aimed right at me. Ouch! What is this? I picked up the paper that had hit my forehead and fluttered to the ground. It looked like some kind of document. As I unfolded it, I realized it was a divorce paper. It had Oliver's signature and seal, leaving only my section blank. Shocked, I glanced towards where the plane had come from and saw my husband smirking at me. My son and his wife were also snickering beside him. A divorce paper, of all things. Was he implying he wanted a divorce? I was overwhelmed and fled the living room, locking myself in my room in shock. I paced around my room, my mind racing. Ignoring me was one thing, but this harassment was beyond belief. The word *divorce* echoed in my head, filling me with turmoil. The silent treatment and the paper airplane divorce papers continued for about 3 months. What I thought would be a short-lived prank showed no sign of stopping. The three of them would look at me with eerie grins. At this point, I felt no emotions anymore. The anger and sadness had given way to complete disbelief. A voice in my head whispered, *maybe I should get a divorce*. Around this time, I started keeping a journal to organize my thoughts. I opened a notebook and began scribbling furiously with a pen I found in the drawer. I had recently discovered that Mason and Daisy were unemployed. I overheard them talking with Oliver about it while they ignored me. I didn't know whether it was before or after they moved in, but it seemed they had no income. They laughed derisively, saying they had no intention of working or helping around the house. So what were they doing during the day while I was out? Apparently, they were simply using my credit card to entertain themselves. The card I lent them to buy groceries for dinner had never been returned. The statements from the credit card company were filled with charges from expensive restaurants and luxury brand items. They had been dining out frequently, using my card. Oliver, it seemed, said nothing about this. Did he think money grew on trees? I felt a surge of frustration after finishing my writing. I closed the notebook and shut my eyes. Asterisk, what exactly do these three want from me? Asterisk. One night, I woke up unexpectedly. Even though I knew sleeplessness would affect my work the next day, I couldn't fall back asleep. It was midnight, and I decided to go downstairs to get some water. As I carefully made my way to the living room, trying not to make any noise, I noticed something surprising. The lights were on. The light leaking through the door wasn't the only thing. I also heard hushed voices. Oliver said, "Did you see how desperate she was, trying to please us? It's just pathetic." Daisy replied, "Yeah, her face when she saw the leftovers in the trash was hilarious." Mason added, "The fried chicken and croquettes weren't even that good." When she asked, "Do you not like it?" I almost burst out laughing. Oliver continued, "Honestly, her cooking is below average. Good job, Mason." Daisy agreed, "And I really wish she'd stop inviting me to go shopping with her." They insulted and laughed at me, calling me useless. I wished it were just a bad dream, but it was all too real. I had reached my limit. Once I decided to leave, I acted quickly. I quietly returned to my room and started looking for a temporary apartment. The next evening after work, I packed the essentials into a suitcase. A few days later, I signed the lease for a temporary apartment, got the keys, and headed to the place. That morning, all three of them had gone out, so the house was empty. I called the credit card company and canceled my card, stopping it from being used any further. Leaving the newly built house behind, I arrived at my temporary home and felt an unexpected sense of relief. No more enduring their treatment. My shoulders relaxed, and I collapsed onto the floor. That night, my phone buzzed. Seeing it was a call from my son, I answered. "Hello." "Mom, come back right now. The card isn't working." I canceled the card. "What? Why did you do that?" "We were eating sushi, and now what are we supposed to do?" Asterisk, so they had sushi today. How nice for them. Asterisk, I thought to myself. Figure it out yourself. I snapped at my son before hanging up the call. It was convenient for him to want to talk only when he needed something. Next, Daisy called. Just as I was about to make some instant noodles, my phone rang again. "Hello." "Camilla, it's me. Mason told me you canceled the card. Why did you do that?" She sobbed quietly on the other end. "I was going to treat you to dinner tonight. Please come back." Her insincere words made me decide to speak my mind. "Daisy, I'd be happier if you treated me with money you earned yourself." "What are you saying?" "I don't work. That's cruel," she stammered. "Do you think I don't know?" I responded, my words clearly unsettling her as she kept repeating, well, I mean." "Get your act together," I retorted before hanging up. She was likely puzzled by my words, wondering what I meant. Telling someone to get your act together is a way of telling them to wake up and be responsible. I wanted her to stop relying on my card and get a job, even if it was just part-time, to support herself. Then Oliver called. I had just poured hot water into my noodles and waited the 3 minutes. "Where are you? Stop being stubborn and come home," he demanded, sounding frantic. "Are you also having trouble because the card isn't working?" I asked. He paused for a moment, then asked how I knew. When I told him the others had called, he responded in agreement. I continued, "Sorry, but I'm divorcing you." "What? You can't just decide that on your own. Where are you?" he demanded. "I'm not telling you. Enjoy your time with Mason and Daisy." "I can't do that. They're just money leeches." The fact that he knew this while allowing them to freely use my card left me speechless. They only... "Huh, isn't that something a real estate agent can just handle quickly?" he asked. He was clearly clueless. Since he had always left contracts and other paperwork to me, he had no idea how it worked. If he wanted, he could try going to a real estate agent, but they would just laugh at him. "Speaking of real estate," I said, pausing, "I've already put the land and house up for sale. So, once it's sold, you'll need to move out." While preparing for temporary housing, I decided to put the land and house up for sale. The real estate agent was delighted, noting that the good location would ensure a quick sale. Indeed, there had already been a lot of interest since it was listed. When I told my husband this, he seemed too stunned to respond, as if his earlier bravado had completely vanished. It was truly comical. "And by the way, I've already submitted the divorce papers you threw at me to the city office, so we're no longer married. Don't contact me anymore." Oliver responded, "What? Wait, what are you talking about? Hold on. Hey!" It seemed as if a switch had flipped in him, and he suddenly panicked, but it was too late. "We're divorced. Goodbye, Oliver," I said firmly. Frantically, he yelled, "No." Before that, "What did you say? Are you listening?" I hung up before he could finish. The cup of noodles I had set aside had become soggy and was spilling out of the cup slightly, but I picked it up gently. I was finally free from them. This thought made even the soggy noodles taste good. About a week after listing the house, I received a call saying they had found a buyer. Despite the new construction, which fetched a significant price, the buyer was willing to pay in full up front. I agreed immediately and arranged to finalize the sale in the following days. Before finalizing the sale, I decided to inspect the property one last time with the real estate agent. To my dismay, the 3 of them were still living there. The place was a mess, with garbage scattered around, and the kitchen covered in burn marks from failed cooking attempts. The bathroom was dusty and had an unpleasant smell. It was in no condition to be handed over to a new owner, so we had no choice but to evict them and arrange for a thorough cleaning. In disbelief, I explained the situation to the real estate agent. Despite their protests, we forced them to leave. Although they agreed to vacate immediately, it was clear that they were not sincere. After we left, the 3 of them called incessantly, with the phone ringing every few minutes. Their persistence was infuriating. I blocked their phone numbers and social media accounts. They then came to my workplace, where I formally cut ties with them. Oliver was indifferent, but Mason and Daisy seemed genuinely shocked. Mason said, "Cutting ties? There was no need to go that far." Daisy added, "It's awful, Camilla." Mason then asked, "But I'm different, right?" "I'm your son." "Oh, and by the way, could you make some more fried chicken and croquettes? I love those." At that moment, I remembered him throwing my cooking in the trash. I wondered if he had really felt that way back then. "Don't say things that suit your convenience. I replied firmly and turned my back on them. Since then, I haven't seen my son, his wife, or my husband. I have no idea where they moved. Having left the weekly apartment, I now live in a small apartment for single occupancy. I continue to work but take great pleasure in the freedom of living alone. With the extra time, I can study for qualifications or start new hobbies. I want to enjoy this leisurely time as much as possible. Even though it's not a new house, this small room is still my castle. I'm excited to redecorate, try out some dried flowers, and cook just for myself. With these thoughts in mind, I poured hot water slowly into my cup of noodles.